We're back. We just finished our 11th interview for Outsiders Opinions with Greg Tepper. Here are our thoughts on it. New format kind of thing. I love this interview. I love all our interviews. This one was just fun. It's been a while, but it. I don't think I've laughed so much in an interview we've done here. I'm sure y'all can hear it. Austin, you told me you laughed. I didn't notice it. I'm pretty sure you can notice me laughing. I was struggling throughout the entire interview since he said that. He is hilarious, and it was great learning about Roger Emmerich. That was incredible. What do you think?
Yeah, this is a breath of fresh air. We haven't done one in a while, and this is probably my favorite part of having the channel is doing the interviews. It's fun hearing a new voice, and he really did shine light on some great things that I never realized was part of the job. It's a very insightful interview. He has many great points about how he got into it, how he learned from a lot of his mentors, and what all he's doing now. So I really enjoyed it.
Yep. So hope you enjoyed as well, and talk to you soon. What's up, y'all? It's Austin and Kevin, joined by two-time Emmy Award winner Greg Tepper, the managing editor with Dave Campbell's Texas Football Magazine. You may also see him sometimes on Bally Sports Southwest with the on-air show for high school football on Fridays. And congratulations, Tepper, on the release of Dave Campbell's magazine and the Emmy nomination. Thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate you guys having me on. I should be clear that I did not get the Emmys for being with Dave Campbell's Texas Football. They don't give out Emmys for print media because that would be just a really sad award ceremony. Just a lot of guys sitting around wondering, oh man, what are we going to put in the paper tomorrow? Things like that. So, but yeah, it's good to be with you guys.
Thank you for the clarification on that. So is the 2019 Putt Powell Sports Writer of the Year award, was that for Dave Campbell's?
Boy, I guess that's a weird question because, like, they gave it when I got that award from the Texas High School Coaches Association back in 2019. I think that's for Dave Campbell's, but like also they were just kind of like talking about how I also did the TV thing, so it's kind of like all a big soup, kind of all mixed together. Of like this guy talks about high school football in Texas enough, so let's give him a plaque. So I would say that it was probably a little bit of a little column A, a little column B. So I'll at least put it in the Dave Campbell's category, and that Dave Campbell's was certainly a big part of it.
Okay. So what attracted you to sports writing?
Yeah, I grew up in a sports household. I've got two brothers and a sports crazy dad and my poor mom. And we, sports is always on. Sports is always a big part of what my life was like growing up. Going to a lot of baseball games, going to Ranger games when we lived in Dallas. We lived in Atlanta for a spell. I went to two World Series there. I was lucky enough to go to the Olympics and all this fun stuff. And sports is always just a really big part of my life. And it soon became pretty apparent to me that I wasn't talented enough from an athletic perspective to make a living in sports that way. But what happened when I was a sophomore in high school, I was a sophomore in high school. I wanted to join I went to Campbell High School. I wanted to join the school's broadcast kind of journalism department. They had a basically what was essentially the announcements they would do video wise, but it was really just an excuse to make dumb videos with your friends. And I definitely wanted to be doing that. But one of the prerequisites there at Coppell High School was to take a journalism course. And I'm like, all right, cool, dust this bad boy off. And I had a teacher. Named James Rich, who was really integral in kind of helping me fall in love with journalism. And he kind of guided me towards more of a newspaper path, more of a writing path. And I figured, you know what, this is a way for me to do something in sports without having to, actually participate in sports. And I always enjoyed writing. I always enjoyed reading, and it felt like a pretty good fit. And so, yeah, that's what attracted me there. And then I went on to University of Missouri to study journalism there before I came back and got a couple of jobs before landing at Dave Campbell's Texas Football. So it's a bit of a roundabout way to get to where I am. But I don't know if anybody really has straight lines to their career. So it was, it was kind of a happy accident to stumble into sports journalism, but it's one that I'm happy happened to me.
That's amazing. About the teacher and just the story in general, what is one thing that you are constantly reminded of from your teacher?
Yeah, one of the things that he really taught me about was finding my voice. I think that one thing that a lot of young writers struggle with is and it's easy to fall into this trap, is they're all trying to do an impression of the writer that they like the most, or if they're a broadcaster, they're trying to do an impression of the broadcaster that they like the most. And certainly we're all kind of, we take bits and pieces of people that we admire and things like that. But one of the things that Mr. Rich really taught me was you've got to develop your own voice. You got to be yourself, and that's one thing that I think I've tried to hold steady to is, if you're yourself, if you are just acting as yourself, then you never have to worry about letting the mask slip, because there's just no mask. It's just you being you. And that's difficult though, because that takes a lot of it takes a lot of working on finding your voice. It takes a lot of courage to go out there and be yourself, because it's, you see what other people want and what gets hired and what gets popular, and you want to imitate that. You have to kind of resist those notions and instead find your own voice. And that was something that I struggled with for a while, but that's one thing that really resonates with me, that Mr. Rich taught me, was just, be yourself, and eventually you'll find your way to the place that you're supposed to be. And that's kind of the case with me.
So why high school football? Did it choose you? Did you choose it? How'd that all work out?
It kind of a little bit of both. My first foray into high school football, I played football. Played is generous. They gave me a jersey at Coppell, and but when was a junior, I guess really my first foray with high school football was probably when I was working for the Tulsa World. I had an internship with the newspaper in Tulsa, and I was able to kind of cover a little bit of high school football, kind of in the lead up to the season, and enjoyed that. And then the next year, during, it was actually the first semester of was my senior year at Missouri, I got an internship with the Dallas Morning News, and had a great mentor in Jock Taylor, who helped me kind of craft and the writer that I've become today. And one of the things with that internship was that they just treated you like a full-time staffer, and they said, "All right, here's your beat." And my beat was east. It was east, like the east sector of Dallas high school football for the fall season. You're just in charge of covering it. So it's covered Garland and Mesquite and Rockwall, and all the way out to Royce City and things like that. And that's when I really sunk my teeth into high school football, and when I really discovered that I like this stuff. That this stuff is wild and weird and fun and interesting, and this playground that you can really do a lot with. And so I had that internship. I ended up finding my way back to the Dallas Morning News after a couple of years. After graduating, spent a couple of years there. And while I wasn't working in the sports department, I always found myself gravitating towards the sports department. I was stringing for them on Friday nights and covering games. And eventually, a job came open at Dave Campbell's Texas Football, and I applied and was lucky enough to get it. And I've been there ever since. So a little bit of me choosing high school football, and a little bit of high school football choosing me. I got bit by the bug early, and I certainly fell in love with it, and I've found a way to continue to do it even today.
So you mentioned you worked with Dallas Morning News, but it wasn't sports um, related.
Yeah. So when I came out of Mizzou, I did have, right after graduation, I took a job back in Tulsa, on the sports desk, working. My shift was 4:30 p.m. to 12:30 a.m. on the sports desk, putting together the paper, copy editing, things like that. That was a huge thing for me, and I'm so glad I did that, because it really gives you an idea of the guts of editing and the real just nitty-gritty details and the things that go into it. And it gave me an appreciation for kind of the art of editing. But after that, I knew I wanted to get back to Texas, and there was a job at the Dallas Morning News that came open in their community newspaper division. In what was there was a weekly tab called Neighbors Go. Shout out Neighbors Go, R.I.P. Pour one out. And and so I got hired on to do that. So I was essentially the editor of a couple of like community newspapers through the Dallas Morning News. I would always try to shoehorn sports into what I was doing, but essentially it was a job that I figured I want to get to this place. I wanted to write for the Dallas Morning News in their sports department. I was like, let's get in the building and then let's see what happens. And I spent a couple of years there. And who knows what would have happened if Dave Campbell's hadn't come along. But that was my kind of foot in the door and my way to get back to Texas because I knew that's where I ultimately wanted to be.
What was your first year with Dave Campbell's like?
Hectic, very hectic. I got hired in February, and I'll never forget that the first real event, I guess, like the first real thing that we did, as I was the associate editor at the time. There was a managing editor, a gentleman by the name of Travis Stewart. And I got hired, and when I came in, he was like, "All right, cool. In 2 weeks, we have our cover shoot, and we're going to Midlothian, and we're going to shoot the cover with Cyrus Gray, who is the running back at Texas A&M, a DeSoto product, and then Jonathan Gray. Jonathan Gray was the running back at Aledo, who went on to Texas." Had I would say, a pretty injury riddled career there, but a guy who was on, that was our first summer magazine. And I just remember thinking like, okay, this is like the big time. This is, we get to go out and right away you go do this cover shoot. And that was fun. But then there was the idea of putting together a 400-page magazine. So they like really front loaded the fun and really backloaded the grind of like, why don't we, oh, by the way, we still have to cover 47 college football teams and 1,400 high school football teams. We have to edit it and put it all together, and we're going to need you to write all this stuff. Okay. And by the way, we're going to need you to learn InDesign. Actually, it wasn't InDesign. I think we work on Quark at that point. But anyway, we're going to need you to do all that and lay out these pages too. Okay, bye. So it was real hectic, and it was real trial by fire. And then it was also a matter of, I had a decent feel for some of the high school football, especially from my time with the Dallas Morning News. I knew a lot about the Dallas high school football. If you need me, to say, something about Dallas Pinkston or maybe a team like Forward Polytechnic, I could do that. But like they were talking about, hey, tell me everything you need to know about Clear Springs. I'm like, I don't even know where that is. What about all these El Paso teams, things like that. So it was hectic. But it was really kind of drinking from a fire hose. And I'll tell you another guy who really helped me out. One of my jobs in my first 2 years there, they also thrust me into co-hosting a statewide radio show on the Texas State networks. It was a scoreboard show on Friday nights. It was myself, and it was the legendary Roger Emmerich. Roger Emmerich the late Roger Emmerich is a Texas Radio Hall of Famer and an icon. And so and that guy had forgotten more high school football than I'll ever know. And so to sit there in that studio for 2.5 hours and do that show with him was such a remarkable experience, to learn so much from him, and then also to make mistakes in front of him that he would gently correct me. And that was so important to my growth. And a guy who, there's, mispronouncing names on the radio, and instead of him just stopping down the show and laughing at me, he would say, "Oh, well, actually, partner, that's Refugio, not Refugio," things like that. It was things like that that were really helpful for me. And so that's a long answer to a short question, but my first year at Dave Campbell's was a lot. And but it was fun, and it was, I knew that it was the right place for me. That's for sure.
Wow, that's incredible about Roger, being able
Mm-hmm.
to work with Roger Emmerich. I
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember listening to him, but I've heard a lot of stories about just how great he
Yeah.
was.
No, he was an icon, and I got to work with him for 2 years, and kind of developed a friendship with him, and what a man he was. And now his son, Ted Emmerich. Ted Emmerich does a lot of play-by-play stuff for ESPN, and things like that. And he's a star, and he's become a good buddy too. So yeah, but I'm a big believer that nobody gets where they're going by themselves. And Roger Emmerich was certainly one of those guys who helped me along my path to help me do what I do now.
So how do you overcome writer's block? I've heard a lot of people talk about it, and especially you're in sports. So how can you have so many high schools to cover? How do you get words out for all of them?
Yeah, so you're kind of there's two different questions there, and I want to make sure I answer both of them because the first one is how do you get, or I'll take the second part last. You said how do you get stuff down for all of them, and the thing you have to remember, especially with something with a scope as broad as Texas high school football, is you're not going to be able to know everything about all teams all the time. And so it's a matter of sorting, and it's a matter of understanding. For me, my little trick is it's important for me to know one thing about every team in the state. At least one team thing about every team in the state. Maybe it's just their mascot, right? Maybe it's just that I know that Galveston Ball is the Golden Tornadoes. Okay, that's it. I don't know a player. I don't know. I can't remember the coach or anything like that. But those types of things, you need to have that one thing. And so for me, it's just a matter of kind of organizing your brain in a way that it's like a filing cabinet, and you can pull out that file whenever you need it. And maybe that file's only got one thing in it, but it's got something in there, so you can make your way through it. So that's one thing. The other thing you said was about writer's block, and that is something that I struggle with, and every writer struggles with at some point, and sometimes it is fleeting, and sometimes it is lasting, and it is frustrating. The thing for me that I got taught a while ago is it's better to have something down than nothing down. And so even if you're trying to figure out where to start with a story, you're trying to figure out, get something down, even if it sucks. And even if you know as you're writing it that it sucks, just get something down, get yourself going, because in a lot of ways, what's important is to get into the story, and that will help to jog your brain so that you can circle back to the top and say, okay, I'm going to start it this way. There's also a number of people, this doesn't work for me, but there's a lot of people who they will, if you're having trouble with a lead, right? You're having trouble, or you're having trouble finding a way to finish something. If you're having trouble with a specific part, that you go and you write the other parts first. There's a lot of people who I know who will say, if you're writing in a traditional kind of inverted pyramid, we're getting real journalism nerdy here, but if you're writing the traditional inverted pyramid, you're going to have your lead stuff, and then you're going to get into the meat of it, stuff like that. There are people who write those stories backwards because they are good at getting the little minute details that don't matter down first, and that helps them to find a way to craft the other things. They work from bottom up. That does not work for me. That's just not how my brain is wired. But what I will do is I will write the world's dumbest, stupidest lead for a story just so I can get into the meat of the story. And then hopefully by the time I get to the end of it, I've thought of something better to write to do at the top. So a lot of it is just getting those words down on paper, getting those words down on a document, and getting into it, because the best this is sounds so dumb, but the best thing to cure writer's block is just to write. Is just to get things out. And so for me, that's what helps for me is getting past getting past the thing that's giving you trouble, even if you know it sucks, knowing full well that you can come back and you can clean it up.
We talked earlier about finding your voice. When you worked with Roger Emmerich, and were you how did you find your voice then, or um, just was it difficult?
Yeah, I think that certainly helped, especially from a broadcast perspective, because I didn't, my degree is in newspaper journalism. I'd never done any broadcasting. I'd never done anything like that. Before then, I'd done like one guest appearance on high school sports special on WFAA once, and it was more that they just probably felt bad for me. So I'd never done any sort of broadcasting. And getting to be with Roger, watching like just a master craftsman, and just watching how comfortable he was. I just remember walking into that studio and being so tense and so nervous. And here's a guy who just like flips on the microphone and he just talks. But one of the things that especially from a broadcaster perspective with voices is that um almost almost everyone that you see, at least almost everyone that I've worked with in the broadcast realm, when you get them off air, that's just them. Roger Emmerich was that way. You get him off the air, and he just still has that voice of God, right? And same thing with like Rick Renner. Rick Renner from Bally Sports Southwest is a guy with crazy hair, and he's got wackadoodle personality and stuff like that. And everyone says, "Oh man, it's got to be an act." And I'm like, "No." He texts me, and just like I can hear in his voice, like, "Hey, buddy, you want to go play some golf?" It's like it's just who he is. And for me, that was so being around people like that who were pros, who were also very clearly themselves, kind of gave me the permission structure to just be myself, that I don't have to go out there and put on some sort of act. And so that was really helpful, just to know that these guys were out there doing their thing, being themselves, and that you too can do that. Yeah, work on some of the things that you need to. That doesn't absolve you of the responsibility to improve yourself, but to just be yourself. That was to work with those guys like that, like Roger Emmerich and like Rick Renner, were it was really important for me.
What was the hardest thing for you to transition from newspaper writing to being on air?
There's a lot of cursing in newsrooms, and you can't do that in broadcasting. Um, so that was the biggest. No, I'm kidding. That's one of them. But the other thing, I would say that the biggest transition, because I was thrown into, from the television perspective, I was kind of thrown into it in 2013. Our managing editor took another job in July, and they said, "Hey, Tepper, do you want to be the managing editor?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds great. Like, get a promotion, go there, get the big chair, be in charge of the magazine." They said, "Cool. We're also going to need you to host a 4-hour live TV show on Friday night. Could you do that too?" And okay. So I just kind of did. I would say the biggest transition is just finding a way to again organize your thoughts in a way that is cohesive. That there's a lot of really smart people out there who just, the way that you write things and the way that you say things are very different, and there's matter of organizing your thoughts in a way that makes sense on paper that would not make sense in broadcast, or vice versa. And so it was just a matter of, and that it was just a matter of kind of learning that difference, and that just literally just takes time. And reps, and the ability to do these, to just try it. And I've never gone back and watched that first show that I did back in August 2013, but I bet that was a train wreck. Just, it has to be. But maybe it wasn't, and for some reason Bally, formerly Fox, has kept me on. So there is a difference between organizing your thoughts for writing and for broadcasting, and there's just a learning curve of making sure that you're able to do those types of things.
What unexpected challenges have you faced as managing editor of Dave Campbell's Texas Football Magazine?
Unexpected challenges. That's a good one. One of the things that we've tried to do, I'll go micro and then I'll go macro. The micro is, I mentioned there's 47 college football teams in the state of Texas, and there's more than 1,400, closer to 1,500 high school football teams in the state of Texas. And one of the things that I don't think I fully appreciated and fully recognized when I took that job was that every one of those teams is somebody's favorite team. Every one of those teams is somebody's most important team. And you've got to make sure you reflect that. Yes, I may not have a ton of good things to say about a team that's lost 47 games in a row or things like that, but you've got to find a way to make them feel included and make them feel like they're part of the party, because they are. They're part of the football. They're part of the football party. And so whether you're talking about the Alito Bearcats, who have 10 state championships, or you're talking about the Texas College Steers, which is a college football program that you two just learned existed when I said it. You've got to make sure they feel included and feel important, because they are, and they matter to the tapestry. So that's the micro. The macro, as far as challenges are concerned, is that Dave Campbell's Texas Football is an old brand. It's an old brand. We've been around since 1960. And a lot of people know us as the magazine that you buy every June or July, that you read and then sits on the back of your toilet for 6 months. That's what we do. And much like, if you want to dive into the real economics of print media is not doing great, guys. It's a challenge. And so we had to find a way to make ourselves the center of the football conversation in Texas when we are known only as a magazine that comes out once a year. That's tough. It's easier for somewhere like the Dallas Morning News, who puts out a newspaper every day, or easier for somewhere like Sports Illustrated, who puts out a magazine every week. We don't get to do that. We get one shot at it. And so one of the things that, as managing editor, I've tried to do, and my staff has tried to do, is to diversify what we do. And so that's why we've got a number of podcasts. We've got a number of shows, online shows. That's why we have the partnership with Bally Sports Southwest to be front and center as far as TV is concerned and things like that. So that's one of the challenges that we faced, is making an old brand that has a lot of integrity and has a lot of name recognition and and a special place in a lot of people's hearts, and making it go from a once a year thing to a year round thing. That's been a long process for us. I think we're getting there, but that's one of the big challenges that we face, as I've faced as managing editor, and we face as a team.
Do you have a favorite article, magazine, or show that you've done to this point in your career?
Yeah. That's tough. Okay. I'll give you a couple. One, I wrote a story for the summer edition of Dave Campbell's Texas Football. I want to say it was the 2017 edition, maybe 2016, around then. But it was a story about a town out in West Texas called Marathon. It's spelled marathon, pronounced marathon. And they were at one point in the 1970s, like the football center of Texas. They won a bunch of state championships. They were a dominant force in Texas high school football at the 6-man football level. And I wrote a story. It's now a ghost town. They don't have a football team anymore. There's 14 kids that attend the school. It's unfortunately a dying town out there in far west Texas. Think like Big Bend area out there. But we went out there and we wrote this story because it still means a lot to a lot of people. And they had the most. I believe I called it the most remarkable story, or the most remarkable season in Texas high school football history, and I stand by that. It was back in 1974, I believe it was. 1974, 1972, around then, 70s, around then. They put together or 1976. They were a 6-man football team, and they were put into a 1-team district for the first and only time in UIL history, because there were no other teams around them anywhere near them that could play 6-man football. They were on an island. And so what they did was they scheduled against all road games against a bunch of 11-man teams, and put an extra guy on the field, or put 5 extra guys on the field, and they went undefeated, and then they won a 6-man state championship. It's an incredible story, and I was really blessed to be able to write it back in the summer edition of 2018. 2018 is when it was. But then as far as the show is concerned, we've had some really good shows. The one that really stands out to me is I was able last year to be able to do color commentary on the 2A Division I state championship game between Shiner and Hawley, and that was a real dream come true for me. And it was a lot of fun. So that'll be like a show that was remarkable. We've also had just like scoreboard shows after crazy nights of high school football with me, Craig Way, and Rick Renner just all going nuts, which are always fun. So yeah, there's a handful that kind of stick out in my mind.
That's funny that you chose to talk about the marathon Mustangs, because I recently read the article on your website, and I just love the beginning of it. Marathon, Texas is not a ghost town. That just immediately
it's a cool place. It's a super cool place out there, and it's a tiny, just dusty West Texas town. But there's a heart to it, and the stadium's still there, and it's been unused for I want to say they played a game in 2005, and that was the last time they played, which is very sad. But But yeah, it was a cool story, and I was really proud to be able to tell that story to a big audience for people who may not know, because a lot of our job as journalists is to be historians too, and that's an important historical artifact.
Now, what was it like to be? What was it like? How did you feel when you received your first Lone Star Emmy Award in 2018?
Um, yeah, it's weird. Um, it's weird because it is a personal achievement, because I was part of the team for High School Scoreboard Live that won it, and certainly I think I did my part. But really, what was so cool is that I was just proud of the team. I was proud of because there's a lot of people who put in a lot of work to put that show together. It's a wild 2 hour ride of highlights and things like that. It's not, I tell people all the time that me and Rick and Craig are the three least important people on that show. Like, between the producer and the director and all the editors and all the guys behind the scenes and the audio engineers and guys like that. I mean, it's a real team effort, and so there's just an immense amount of pride there, to win an Emmy and to be recognized like that. Because I don't know, I feel like high school football is kind of the little engine that could, and we've we've got we've got people who love us, but they're like, I think there's still a lot of people who think that we're really niche. And so for us to go out there and beat sportscasts that are talking about the Cowboys, and for us to go out there and beat sportscasts that are, talking about, the Stars, the Mavericks, or things like that, that's just really cool. And I felt representative of high school football writ large, and really just part of the commitment that Bally Sports Southwest has put forth towards high school football coverage. So it's cool. They give you a trophy, and you're just like, you just keep looking at it. You're just like, what are you doing here? Like, you don't belong to me. You belong to, like, Maya Rudolph or something like that. But it's really cool, and they're neat. I've got two of them, and they can definitely impale a child, if you're asking.
Okay, that's
They
good
got
to
And
know.
sharp
then
wings. I'm telling you, these wings, they come to points. I have to keep them out of reach of my kids.
That's good to know. I appreciate.
and then how was the 2019 Media Person of the Year? Was that any different?
It was real similar. That was given by the Gridiron Club of Dallas, and that was an immense honor from that organization. Again, just recognizing that, I think, to me, that's just recognition for all the people who put in the work on behalf of not only Bally but also Dave Campbell's Texas Football and stuff like that. I'm the face. I'm the guy who goes out there and people see, but there's so many people behind the scenes that make that possible. So, between the Putt Powell Award, and things like that, the honors that I've gotten are really, they're overwhelming, and I'm just out here um, trying to do my best to cover high school football, and to cover it in a way that I think it deserves to be covered, because I think it's fun and neat. I wish more people were into it.
That's great to know, and we appreciate you so much for taking time out of your day to spend with us. And thank you again.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Appreciate you guys having me on.